on YouTube. Let me record on this computer. Recording. Looks like you're recording. I'm recording. And this is Male Entrepreneur Podcast, episode number 164. And we are live in 3, 2. All right. Welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast with your host, the male entrepreneur himself, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
Hey, what's up, man? I'm doing pretty good. It's funny you say that because my kids always say that. They run around and say my dad is the male entrepreneur. Uh, they see the logo and they're super proud, and they're telling their friends and everybody at school. So it's kind of funny because my son yesterday came to me. He's like, "Dada, so what exactly does a male entrepreneur do?" And I had to explain it to him, which is the funniest thing because he's almost 8, but he's still trying to grasp the concept.
You know, I think your kids have a slight advantage. I didn't even know the term entrepreneur until I was in after I had started my own business and I was struggling to figure out how to break through to the next level. And I'm in my mid-20s. That was the first time I'd ever even heard the term entrepreneur. It was like one of those words that like sovereignty or there's these words that have so much profound meaning, but for most of us, we never even hear these words until our mid-20s, mid-30s, and being a kid and having a dad that exposes them to these ideas early on. I think that's a distinct advantage that your kids are going to have above or further on than other kids are.
Yeah, I think our kids in general have an advantage over us in many different ways. I'm just noticing how much they know about different things about life. I think it's their TV shows. I don't think they watch the same type of cartoons. I think it's different. But yeah, you're right. What kids grow up with is basically what they excel in. It's really interesting. I saw this movie, Nathan, the other day. It was awesome, phenomenal, and very well timed. It's called The Dawn Wall on Netflix. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's about these 2 climbers, but one in particular. I'm not going to spoil it, but I recommend it for every guy out there to watch. Watch it as soon as you hear this episode. Book some time this evening and watch it. If your life doesn't change as a result of this, if you don't pull up your pants and do what you need to do to actually get what you want out of life, I don't know what you can do then. Yeah, throw in the towel. No, I shouldn't say that, but no, this movie is so awesome. It is so awesome in so many different ways. I think we can actually break it down. So let's send this out to our audience. Let's get them to watch it, and let's actually do a future episode and actually break down this movie and why it's so powerful. So Nathan, for you, man, you definitely got to watch it.
Okay, what's the name of it again?
The Dawn Wall. So DAWN, The Dawn Wall.
Okay,
and it's about climbers. So if you see it, it's a documentary. It's about climbers.
All right. Coming future episode. What do we got on this week's episode, though?
Well, this week's episode is really, really, timely. And we're bringing this up because I just went through a recent experience with Microsoft. So we're going to talk about what not to do. We're going to talk about how organizations like Microsoft go from being one of the world leaders to being a flop, for example. I think it's really, really important to talk about this topic, especially now in COVID, because a lot of businesses are cutting back and they're doing things differently, especially when it comes to technology, and they're messing up, they're screwing up, and they're losing a lot of opportunity.
Okay. So Microsoft has always been one of those you love them or hate them companies, because I remember the operating system back in the late 90s was one of the most phenomenal technology things ever to happen. But it seems like, especially going forward since then, people get mad about their buggy updates. People get angry about some of the user privacy things and backdoors that they've been caught having. And obviously their founder, or their most vocal member of the company, Bill Gates, he's also one of those love or hate guys as well, especially right now. As you mentioned, Corona, there's a lot of Bill Gates worship and Bill Gates demonization. Um, so I'm kind of interested to see where you're going to go with this one.
Yeah, it's just based on an experience I had. So I have a Microsoft Surface Pro. I bought about 4 years ago. I spent a lot of money on it. I've had no complaints really, except for that there are some performance issues. But what ended up happening was I started looking at the screen about a week or 2 weeks ago. I'm like, oh, that's funny. There's like this weird discoloration. And then I started to look, the screen was popping off. I'm like, I must have dropped it or something. So I made up the story. I'm like, I must have dropped it. And then as I did some research, I realized that it's a manufacturer's defect where the battery actually swells and it can actually explode.
Mm.
But what it does, it pushes the screen off the casing, and it pretty much screws up the Surface Pro. So I did some research, and it seemed like within a certain period, Microsoft was like, okay, we'll replace it, whatever that looks like. But it was past that 3-year mark. We're in the 4th year. So I said, let me see what they do in this instance, because this is a safety hazard. This isn't just a performance issue. This is hey, it could catch on fire and explode.
Mhm.
And even their reps, for example, they've stated, don't stop using it. So I'm like, okay, so let's see how they approach this issue. I tried calling. So interestingly enough, they've shut down all, and I didn't know this. And because I haven't followed Microsoft really as a company, but they shut down all their physical locations in 2020. Especially like in Canada, and I think in many places in the US, and took it all to phone, which I find really interesting. And I think part of that catalyst was the COVID challenge, because people weren't going into stores anyway. So I think they made the decision to say, let's close her down, right? Because their stores were not like Apple, where Apple is booked. Like you go into an Apple store and you're waiting there in line up forever. You go into Microsoft store and sometimes there's people there, sometimes there aren't, depending on where the location is. But long story short, they closed it down, and they're trying to basically create an online experience, right? And it's a crappy experience ever. And so that's my whole point here, is that they've gone online because of COVID and they can't get their crap together. So funny thing is, you go online and you say, okay, I want to buy this, or I need to speak to someone. They show a number. When you go to the number, they tell you to go back online, and it's this vicious cycle or circle of phone numbers and emails, or chatbots trying to get a hold of someone. And I spent 3 days doing this, and I spent 3 days, A, because I was pissed, and B, because I study experiences, and I want to know what they're doing, what their end goal is, and I couldn't figure it out. Like I couldn't figure it out because I was going in so many different places. I was like, I give up. My hands, I'm just throwing in the towel. But the last experience I had was really interesting. I talked to a gentleman, tech support, and here's what he said. He said, okay, yeah, we know this is a known issue, but hey, we have a trade-in program. You pay $800 and you'll get a new Surface Pro 4. And I said, and he's like, okay. So I said, is this refurbished or is it actually new? He said, refurbished. I'm like, okay, then it's not new, buddy. Second, how long is the warranty? Well, it's three months. I said, well, what happens after 3 months?
Mm.
Well, you're out of warranty. I'm like, what if the same issue happens? Well, we can't guarantee anything. So I'm like, okay, so you basically want me to pay $800 to get the same model and not guarantee it's going to happen again. So long story short, I go to him. I'm not happy about this. I do want to send in a formal complaint, and I do want to send the pictures. Where do I send it to? And can you give me my case number? And he's like, well, we don't have a case number. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a case number? Every time I've talked to Microsoft, there's always a case number. Every time I call, they always give me a case number. He's like, well, I'm calling from home, or you're speaking to me, I'm at home, and we haven't done anything, so I can't give you a case number. I said, can you give me some kind of a number to reference this call, or reference notes? Are you putting notes in the system? Well, we haven't done anything. I'm like, I'm getting pissed off here now. So I said, what do I reference all these conversations that I've had? And he's like, well, you can't. I said, can I speak to a supervisor? Well, I'll get my supervisor to call you. I said, what reference are you going to give him? So I knew he wasn't going to get a supervisor to call me. Long story short, I said, can you tell me what you're going to do? Can you give me a number or not? And he said, I'll get a supervisor to call you. And I said, no, you're not. And he hung up. And I was being polite, but he hung up. So I walked out of there and I said, I gave up on this whole Surface Microsoft, you could say, challenge or experience or curiosity, because I said, they're just going downhill now. It's just crappy. And here's the interesting thing, Nathan. I wanted to buy another Microsoft product. I wanted to buy another Microsoft laptop, but they just wouldn't allow me to, because they gave me the crappiest service. So I have swore now that I'm not going to buy their hardware products again. I have to use their software because a lot of the stuff that I use is Windows based. But I'm not going to buy another product. And I'm going to tell everybody. I'm going to spit this out on social media and everywhere because I don't believe a company like that should exist the way they treat people.
So the weird thing, I would say, well, switch to Apple, but I've heard horror stories about customer service from Apple like this as well. And it feels like I remember being a kid and customer service was like a huge thing. And it was, you heard things like the customer is always right, and you saw these companies that just went out of their way. I remember uh, t- getting like finding holes in pants that were from like shoddy stitching from Levi's, and a year later after we purchased them and having no receipt whatsoever and still being able to trade them in for a new pair. And it seems like, number one, customer service has taken a back seat as far as priority goes, and it's not just Microsoft. I know we're kind of harping on Microsoft, but
Mhm.
a lot of the other consumer electronics companies are very similar with the way they treat customers now. And I also want to get your point on, or your take on built-in obsolescence, the business model of making things deliberately break
Mhm.
down so that customers have to come back and buy them every couple of years. You have to go buy a new computer, you have to go buy a new whatever. And maybe it's just my memory, but I remember pants and shoes and all kinds of stuff lasting years and years when I was a kid. And it seems like it's not a bug. It seems like it's a feature now that stuff breaks down. And you would think if they're expecting you to buy more frequently, they would go out of their way to make customer interactions a pleasant experience, but it seems like they just don't care. So I unpacked a lot there, but I
Yeah.
want to get your take on it.
Yeah. So let me start with this. Your customers, again, I wrote the book, Superfans. You need to turn your customers into superfans, your clients into superfans. That's what leads to a profitable business. Nathan, you and I, before the show, we were talking about COVID and how COVID is presenting challenges. And one of the big things that I said there was we just don't have the right information, right? And I don't think the general public is receiving the right information or the correct or accurate information. The same goes for business. Is a lot of business leaders and people that are making decisions, management and frontline, are making decisions based on not having the right information. I've seen that over and over and over again. And so a lot of people and businesses, like these bigger businesses, are stuck on customer attraction and market growth. What ends up happening is that leads to profitability, but they don't realize how much profitability they're losing by having these crappy experiences or giving their clients crappy experiences. So, yes, they're making a lot of money and the numbers are showing that, but the numbers are not necessarily showing what the retention, you can say, opportunities are or how much money they're losing because shareholders are getting paid on growth. If you take a look at how the stock market works, here's what ends up happening. People don't necessarily invest in companies that are just profitable these days. Here is the difference. They invest in companies that have potential growth in markets. There's a big difference there, right? We know there's long-standing companies that have been profitable for years, but they're not sexy anymore because they've kind of tapped out the market, right? And people are saying, okay, these are tenured companies. Their stock market is at the same place. There's not this huge potential in growth. So people are less attracted to that. It's that sexy syndrome. But when they see a company, let's just say like Uber, that said, hey, look, we have this growth opportunity of 1,000%, and we're going to grow this by within this many months, people invest in that. And so then the company has to show investors how they're growing and how much of the market they're capturing. I'm hoping this makes sense because we are driven in a market these days based on the stock market to promote growth over real long-term sustainable profitability.
Mhm.
Big, big difference. And if you look at the numbers, take a look at profitability instead. So people are making business decisions on that. So I don't blame businesses for just going after new customers and saying, screw you to the old customers, long story short. So that is a big problem. But the big companies like this don't suffer. If you take a look at Facebook, take a look at Amazon, all these companies, Amazon is a little bit better because you can still get people on the phone, but trying to get someone from Facebook on the phone, good luck. You'll never reach them ever, right? It's just virtually impossible because they don't care. They're continuing to grow. They have a continuous market that they can try to capture. So you were saying, you know, creating a product or continuous usage or having to rebuy, for example, every so often. Well, that's one of the strategies that businesses use to increase their profits, right? Make your product last a certain period of time, life shelf, right? Or shelf life, I should say, so that people have to come back and buy over and over again. People, it's a different. So if you take a look at North American companies, that's how they build cars. If you take a look at Asian companies like Japanese, Toyota, completely different business model. They try to build vehicles that last for a very, very long time. And that's why Toyota is still one of the leading manufacturers in the world. Yet companies like North America are still trying to catch up. And they don't realize it because, again, it's about market growth and capturing new opportunities and fancy shit like that. So it's a different approach to business. But when, I've been talking about, I'm rambling here, but I think we got to just step back as business professionals and say, what do we want out of our business? Do we constantly want to be trying to attract new customers, which we have to do, but do we want to get caught in that hamster wheel? Or do we want to create long-term sustainable profitability by nurturing our existing relationships?
Mhm.
And that will lead to more customers as well. It's just a different strategy.
It feels like it feels like if you have a football team, like a high school football team, and you hire a coach and he comes in, and for the whole year that he's there, he's just constantly running the front guys, like the best quarterback and whoever the first string of players are. He just plays them every single game, all four quarters, and that throughout that year they have a huge winning streak because he never gives them a break. But then you have another coach come in the next year, and he comes into the situation, he's like, wow, we've just abused and ran our first string players down to the point where they're suffering concussions, they're suffering broken bones. We can't run the team this way anymore. We need to do it in a more sustainable way. We need to we need to let some of the other players come in and play a quarter. We need to let the second round or second string quarterback come in and throw some run some plays. And then the team suffers a little bit, but overall it's better for the team, but they don't win as many games, and everybody gets mad at the second coach, and everybody sees the first coach as this genius coach who had a all winning season. And it feels like that's kind of how people view businesses when it comes to the stock market. If you just milk it dry like the first coach did, and leave this empty husk of a business, you're celebrated and praised. But if you do the things that lead to long-term sustainability, you're demonized by
Mhm.
the current investing gurus out there. I don't know if there's any solution to it.
I don't know, but this is one thing that I think actually Jeff Bezos played well. And I'm not a big fan of Jeff Bezos. I think that Amazon is too big, and I'm being very open and honest about that. I think they have too big of a monopoly. I think they've helped a lot of people in a lot of ways from a business owner perspective, but I think they're at the point where they're so big they are dangerous, because they can take out any company that they want. Like they can buy them out, do whatever they want. They're going after FedEx, but we'll see. The only thing saving FedEx is the government, and the government's keeping a clean eye, a strong eye on that. But long story short, when Jeff Bezos was actually growing Amazon, one of the things that he said to the investors, and he's very smart about this, I have to give him credit, was if you're going to invest in this company based on immediate returns, we're not the company for you. That's not what we're about. We are about long-term growth, and we are going to invest heavily back into the company to grow this business, but it's not about instantaneous profitability. And so that was his strategy that he used, and look what happened. Right? Look how the Amazon just literally became a beast by looking at the long-term picture, and they're a prime example of that. But you're absolutely right, man. It all comes down to economics, and it all comes down to the shiny thing syndrome right now. And everybody is basing it on growth. The tech industry is one of the biggest reasons, right? Tech is one of those industries that's constantly changing, constantly evolving. It's constantly like, if you take a look at manufacturing, yeah, that's evolving too, actually, in a lot of ways. But vehicles aren't necessarily evolving at the same pace as regular technology. Yes, we have battery powered vehicles, yay, but you still got four wheels, right? You still got seats in the vehicle, you still got all the same stuff. They're pretty much being built the same way, but technology is changing significantly. AI, right? All of this stuff is rapidly changing. So tech in certain industries is leading the way in other industries and creating, I'm going to say, a good example in a lot of ways, but because it forces people to change, right? People have to change their business models and become more efficient. That's one good thing about evolution, is that you have to keep up with competitors. Otherwise, you go out of business. So it forces you to remove the friction from your business, right? And actually pull your socks up and say, I want to constantly improve. But from the other side, it's like constantly chasing that squirrel where we don't look at the big picture. Like, why are people in business in the first place? Isn't it to serve a customer and client, right? Is it to make them happy? Like, I think that's something fundamentally that we've just lost over the last decade.
Yeah, short-term investment returns make the investors happy, and who cares about the workers and the customers? And it seems
Yeah.
like that's the model for a lot of businesses these days. So I guess the main takeaway from this week's episode is treat your customers well until you're big enough to where you don't have to treat them well anymore.
Yeah, that's the exact strategy you want to use. And then your business name will be showing up on this podcast as we're doing another rant about it. But yeah, but all honesty, take care of your customers. That's the one thing. It will give you profitability long term. I think that's the simple thing. So awesome way to sum it up there, Nathan.
All right, awesome. If you want more business tips like this, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. Where's the best place that people can go to catch more
Yeah,
episodes?
YouTubeformen.com and mailpodcast.com.
All right, man. Until next time, we'll catch you later.
Catch you later, man.